Every year during festivals all across Japan, local communities carry portable Shinto shrines called mikoshi. During the festival, the kami, or the spirit of the local shrine, is understood to move into it and ride along. These things can weigh hundreds or even thousands of pounds, and teams of people hoist them up onto their shoulders, chant together, and carry them through the neighborhood for hours. They sometimes deliberately bounce and jostle the shrine in a practice called tamafuri, soul shaking, which is believed to reinvigorate or enhance the power of the kami. This is a lot of work and raises a basic question: why do people do things like this? Collective ritual shows up everywhere humans exist. Taoists sacrifice hundreds of pigs for the birthday of the Jade Emperor. Jews build temporary outdoor shelters during the holiday Sukkot. Muslims interrupt the workday to gather for prayer. Some rituals are physically demanding or expensive, others only ask you for an hour of your time, but all of them require people to divert effort and resources toward activities that, from a brute evolutionary perspective, don't always have an obvious, immediate, practical payoff. This is the puzzle scholars Martin Lang and Radek Kundt wrestle with in a recent paper on the evolution of collective ritual. If collective ritual is this widespread, and people are willing to invest so much into it, what are they getting out of it? One answer goes back to the anthropologist Roy Rappaport. He argued that ritual is a communication platform, a way to communicate your intentions to cooperate with others. Ritual communicates, "I'm like you, I'm a team player, I'm here to help, you can trust me." This makes sense on one level. When Muslims gather together to pray, doing the same bodily motions as one, you can see how that could communicate information to your co-religionists. But also, it's a not particularly direct way to communicate. We humans have this really cool thing called language. I can much more easily just say, "I'm like you, I'm a team player, I'm here to help, you can trust me." Why would humanity have ever invented a cumbersome, ambiguous, often time-consuming bodily form of communication? Hey, you can trust me, watch this. Well, Rappaport's answer was that ritual communicates in a different way than language, and often in ways that are more subtle and convincing, moving together in prayer or dance, sacrificing something valuable like a pig, or enduring a painful initiation ritual. All of these can communicate things that are much easier to fake with words alone. Scholars over the years have built on Rappaport's central idea of ritual as a communication platform by arguing that collective ritual functions as a signaling system, in the technical sense that biologists use for animal communication. In biology, a signal is some visible behavior that gives another individual useful information. A peacock's tail gives information to a potential mate. A monkey's alarm call warns others that a predator is near. Human ritual communicates information too, but the system is much more complex. A single ceremony can contain several signals at once. For example, a Christian taking the Eucharist can simultaneously publicly identify the person with a religious community, communicate the depth of the person's belief in Jesus Christ, and even signal the person's ascent to the social order, bowing before an ordained religious functionary. Lang and Kundt describe these overlapping signals as part of one larger signaling system. So if you wanted to look for the origins of ritual, why humans do this, you can't identify a single starting point. The system is too complex, so they set out to reverse engineer the process of the system's complexification, to use their term. So in other words, let's assume that rituals are a system that was gradually assembled out of simpler signaling behaviors in the depth of primate evolution. They call them proto-rituals, and then try to identify when humans started doing these proto-rituals. Some of these behaviors might be extremely old, dating back millions of years, and they evolved at different points in our evolutionary history to solve different problems, and only later began to overlap until they formed into something we can recognize as collective ritual. So today we're going to take ritual apart and follow the pieces backward in human evolutionary history to identify the origins of ritual. The first piece is what we can call a similarity signal. The basic idea is that people tend to feel closer to people who act like them. Try to pay attention to this in your next social interaction. If someone subtly mirrors your posture during a conversation, you might come away liking them just a little bit more. This has actually been shown in experimental studies. People are more helpful towards someone who has mimicked them. The effect also shows up when people move together. Dancing in synchrony or marching in step can increase feelings of affiliation and make people more cooperative. So there's a logic behind a marching drill in the military. This is like an absolutely terrible formation for warfighting in the 21st century, but these soldiers are boosting their cooperation using a tried and true similarity signal. Also think about that time you knew all the songs at that Blink-182 concert. You're an elder millennial in his late 30s, and you're surrounded by thousands of other elder millennials singing along with 50-year-old men singing "What's My Age Again?" Nobody has to stop and explain we all have something in common. The collective performance communicates that for the entire duration of the song. So how far back back could similarity signaling have evolved? Well, we obviously can't excavate a synchronized dance from millions of years ago. So scholars look for the mental ability underneath it, what Lang and Kundt call high-fidelity imitation. How far back can we find archaic humans who were really good at watching somebody perform a complicated sequence of movements and copy it exactly? One clue comes from tools like hand axes. These start showing up in East Africa around 1.76 million years ago. Making a hand axe requires a long sequence of carefully controlled strikes, including steps that are not necessarily obvious just from looking at the finished tool. Transmitting this technology from one generation to the next must have required fairly precise imitation. Scholars of signaling theory think that a much simpler form of that ability to imitate could have been one of the earliest ingredients of collective ritual. Maybe some species in the human lineage, millions of years ago, started copying each other's movements. They realize that they're responding to each other, and over time, repeated imitation becomes a way of signaling that, hey, I think our interests line up. In fact, there's some evidence for simpler versions of this in non-human primates. Chimpanzees sometimes join in choruses with socially preferred partners. Monkeys in one experiment preferred human researchers who imitated them over researchers who didn't. Now, I wouldn't call any of this ritual per se, but Lang and Kundt propose that these illustrate a very old capacity for imitation that could later in evolutionary history be recruited into synchronized movement and imitation. And literally hundreds of years later, that same basic capacity scales up to evangelical megachurches singing Christian rock songs together, or Muslims walking around the Kaaba all wearing white clothing. The next piece in this signaling theory of ritual is called a coalitional signal. If a similarity signal tells me that we like each other, coalitional signals tell me that we are part of the same joint activity. If we're trying to surround an angry woolly mammoth, sure, I guess it's useful to know that the guy standing next to me is generally friendly, but I really want to know that you're actually participating in this hunt, that you understand the plan and you know your role in it. Once cooperation requires several people coordinating their actions, just knowing that somebody likes you is just not enough. So the coalitional signaling hypothesis proposes that human cultural displays evolved as a specialized system to credibly advertise the strength, internal stability, and coordination capacity of the group. We see a ton of coalitional signaling in sports. Think about a team huddle before a game. Everyone puts a hand in the middle and the captain shouts, 1, 2, 3, team name. The point is to make the coalition salient. These are the people I'm about to do this thing with. Same goes with the All Blacks doing the haka before a rugby match. A collective ritual which publicly presents the team as a coordinated unit about to enter a joint contest. You can see the same thing in religious processions. During Holy Week in parts of Spain, members of Catholic confraternities process through the streets, sometimes carrying enormous religious floats. Sometimes marching to the same music, wearing a uniform, and performing recognizable roles within the procession. Participating in that performance tells everyone watching that these people belong to this confraternity and that they're acting together as a group. Coalitional signaling can also involve visual markers that make membership immediately legible. Military rank badges can do this, as can body paint, uniforms, or distinctive religious clothing. For example, Muslims embarking on the pilgrimage to Mecca enter a ritual state called ihram, which among other things involves wearing recognizable white clothing. Another example is the Khalsa tradition in Sikhism, which refers to the community of initiated Sikhs who formally commit themselves to a particular religious discipline and way of life. Initiation into the Khalsa traditionally means maintaining visible signs like uncut hair and wearing a steel bracelet called a kara. These are religious obligations, but they also make religious community publicly recognizable. Experimental studies have indicated that people pick up on coalitional signals in early childhood. In one study, researchers taught groups of preschoolers group-specific, ritualized ways of playing with beads, like, this is the way that the green group plays with these beads. After repeating these over several sessions, the kids who learned the ritual spent more time showing their beads to other members of their own group. The researchers interpreted this as the kids becoming more concerned with displaying that they knew and participated in the group's special way of doing things. The harder point is figuring out when archaic humans could understand a coalition in the first place. Lang and Kundt look for evidence of shared intentionality, like evidence for coordinated hunting. In South Africa, stone points that were probably put onto wooden weapons appear around 500,000 years ago. More widespread evidence for this kind of hunting weapon appears in Africa about 300,000 years ago. So this is one possible sign of increasingly complicated collective action, like group hunting, that likely involved coalitional signaling. The next piece is a commitment signal. Suppose a group is preparing for a hunt that could go badly, or imagine two groups forming an alliance before going to war. Knowing that someone is friendly is useful, Knowing that they are part of your coalition is even more useful. But you still have to wonder, will they actually stick with us when things get hard? Hey, you can count on me. Can I though? Words are cheap. You can promise to help me tomorrow and then change your mind tomorrow. One way to make that promise more convincing is to attach a cost to it. This is the basic logic of costly signaling theory, which I've talked about on the channel before. Think about putting down a large non-refundable deposit. Saying I'm definitely coming costs you nothing, but handing over $500 tells me that you're willing to put something valuable on the line. Ritual can work in a similar way. If someone accepts pain or gives away valuable resources or invests a huge amount of effort in a public ceremony, the cost makes their commitment harder to fake. Someone who barely cares about the group has less reason to pay it. Lang and Kundt point to experimental studies where people who paid higher costs to communicate cooperative intentions later contributed more to a common pool of resources. Other studies found that observers of painful rituals actually interpret costly ritual behavior as evidence of commitment. Even toddlers pay attention to how much time and effort somebody has invested in an action. We can see this in the sun dance, historically practiced by several Native American peoples, including the Blackfoot people. The ceremony brings several bands together for days, and as part of the ceremony, men were pierced with wooden skewers attached to a central pole, and then danced around it until their flesh tore. These are costly signals. For someone who's not really invested in the group, they would never do this. Now, as with similarity and coalitional signaling, it's very difficult to pinpoint when costly signals could have emerged in early humans. But Lang and Kundt argue it requires the capacity to imagine alternatives and think ahead, what psychologists sometimes call mental time travel, the ability to imagine possible future situations and plan around them. They look for archaeological evidence of behaviors that would have required people to anticipate needs in advance.
So, for example, around 300,000 years ago in Kenya, people were transporting obsidian tools over long distances, roughly over 50 kilometers.
Carrying raw material that far suggests that people were anticipating needs in advance. This connects to costly signaling because a commitment signal can only work if I can connect what I'm doing right now to what I'm likely to do later. If I'm about to endure a very painful ritual before tomorrow's hunt, I have to understand that the pain is a cost that I'm choosing to pay now in relation to some future action. I also have to recognize that I have alternatives. I could just refuse the ritual or I could stay home. So the same general cognitive capacity that lets someone think, hey, I'm gonna need this obsidian later, also makes it possible to understand that this person is paying a cost now because they intend to follow through later. For these scholars, that ability to mentally project forward possibilities is one of the cognitive capacities in human evolution that makes commitment signaling possible. Okay, so those are the basic ingredients of rituals according to this signaling system theory of ritual. The argument is that collective ritual evolved out of separate signaling behaviors deep in human evolutionary history. Similarity signals, coalitional signals, and commitment signals. The theory proposes that these signals developed separately and then gradually started appearing together, and by around the emergence of Homo sapiens as a species, these behaviors may have coalesced often enough into a repeated, public signaling system that we religious studies scholars later call collective ritual. One thing that may have helped was communal fire. Once people were regularly gathering together at night, a gesture that once passed between two people could now be performed in front of a whole group, who could then copy it, repeat it, and eventually standardize it. There could now be a recognizable group-specific way to say this is how our group prepares for a hunt. Lang and Kundt point to archaeological evidence of fire use at places like Kesem Cave in Israel, dating to around 400,000 years ago, and widespread fire use in Africa by roughly 350,000 years ago. These are possible times when these group-specific traditions could have developed. The next step would be connecting these behaviors to symbolic culture. As symbolic culture became more elaborate, these signals could also start carrying more information. A particular color or design of body paint can identify a named group, or refer to an ancestor, or become connected to a religious story. A dance could enact a mythological epic that the group tells about their gods. Lang and Kundt describe ritual and symbolic communication as co-evolving. The signals became attached to social norms about how people are expected to behave, and eventually performing these behaviors in the correct way, in the correct setting, can itself become one of those norms. So think about all the rituals involved in a wedding. There are standardized words, gestures, objects, and roles that are recognized by the audience and the society at large. This is very close to Roy Rappaport's definition of ritual, a sequence of formal acts and words that is not entirely encoded by the performers, meaning that society has handed down the sequence to you to follow. And once a ritual has a conventional, socially expected form, participation can communicate a huge amount of information to society without anyone having to explain it from scratch. scratch. A wedding ceremony publicly marks a new social relationship because everyone already recognizes what the ceremony is supposed to symbolize, which is only possible when signaling and symbolic communication were linked sometime in humanity's past. Now, a few caveats to keep in mind. This signaling model is one theory for how collective ritual evolved. It is not the explanation. Other scholars have emphasized things like social bonding or ritual's ability to reduce anxiety in uncertain situations. Ritual is a complex system, and the signaling theory is a proposed evolutionary reconstruction. Also, because of the nature of our evidence, there are real methodological challenges to try to reconstruct the origin of ritual. Most ritual behavior leaves almost nothing behind for an archaeologist to discover, so the archaeological record is heavily biased toward the kinds of rituals that happen to leave durable, lasting evidence. For example, the oldest known depiction of people dancing comes from cave art in Borneo, which dates to around 20,000 years ago. But obviously people were capable of dancing long before 20,000 years ago. Pigment gives us older evidence because it can survive hundreds of thousands of years for archaeologists to discover. There's evidence of red pigment used in Kenya around 285,000 years ago, with possible evidence in South Africa going back to around 500,000 years ago. Even here though, a lump of pigment can't really tell us what people were doing with it. We can assume that body paint was being used, but that's more ephemeral than the pigment itself. So Lang and Kundt instead try to reconstruct when archaic hominins in humanity's lineage had the mental capacities necessary to perform these different kinds of signals. And this inevitably involves a lot of guesswork. They admit in their study that even though it's based on up-to-date pertinent evidence, the nature of this reconstruction is inherently speculative. Though I like their approach. Collective ritual is one of the most complicated things that humans do. A single ritual can involve a huge amount of symbolism, music, social obligations, elaborate choreography, and stories about gods, spirits, or ancestors. And the signaling theory breaks that complexity down to its base components: imitation, coalitions, and commitment, woven together into repeated, standardized, and symbolic behaviors that over deep evolutionary time combine into one of the most widespread behaviors in all of human culture. In Roy Rappaport's framing, collective ritual is one of humanity's primary ways of communicating our intent to cooperate. And cooperation matters most when the task is too big for any one person to handle alone. Environmental conservation is a good example. Most of us can't personally restore a forest or protect an endangered species, but coordinated groups of people can. That's why I joined Planet Wild, a community of more than 25,000 members pooling their contributions to fund conservation work around the world. It's like crowdfunding carefully selected conservation missions. What I like about Planet Wild is that it turns a problem that feels way too big for one person into something a community can actually achieve together. And you can see what our membership has achieved. Within 30 days of joining, they share a YouTube video and written reports in the app to keep you updated. I've been a member since January, and I still check the app all the time for new mission updates. Their missions vary from turning an abandoned fish farm into a beaver habitat, to planting tens of thousands of native trees near Lake Victoria, and funding dog patrols to protect sea turtles from poachers in Cape Verde. One mission I really liked was in Mumbai, where a lot of plastic gets washed into storm drains and waterways and eventually ends up in the ocean. Planet Wild partnered with an organization that installs floating barriers called trash booms in these drains, catching the plastic before it reaches the sea. The Planet Wild community helped fund a new trash boom in Mumbai, a major cleanup of built-up waste, and an expansion of the local sorting and processing facility. The new barrier is expected to stop around 10,000 kilograms of plastic every month before it reaches the ocean. So if you want to help fund practical conservation work like this, join me as a Planet Wild member. The first 100 people who sign up using my code RELIGION8 will get their first month paid for by me. After that, you can contribute whatever amount feels right to you. Just scan the QR code on screen or use the link in the description below. Your membership starts supporting conservation work immediately, and within 30 days, Planet Wild will share a video showing what the community funded. And if you want to see them in action first, check out their mission cleaning plastic waste in Mumbai here.